Yeah, right.
I know there's a lot of activity going on here. It's 6:30 we're going to start because we have 5 minutes. 6:30. Okay. Go. All right, well, I want to welcome everybody to the Thursday, November 7th, 2024 Webster Town Board Workshop. We have a pretty robust agenda tonight. We have 5 agenda items, and we're going to start out promptly with a presentation by Maria Dewar on the J. O'Connell Associates grant update. Since it was early October last year, about 13 months ago, we did a resolution to engage that firm to assist us on grants. So, Maria?
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Maria Dewar. I'm the Administrative Assistant Office Clerk for the Director of Community Planning and Development and the Town Engineer. In addition to this role, I also serve as the Town Liaison between the grant consulting firm and the Town Department Heads. So today I'm here to tell you a little bit about our progress so far in the grant world. Identify roles. Each of the 4 circles on this slide play an integral part in the grant process. The department heads lead the process. They decide if a grant opportunity is applied for and assist the grant consultant in formulating the narrative as they are the prime expert source. The grant consulting firm, Gino O'Connell & Associates, wordsmith the narrative and develop and organize the grant to help the town submit a standout application. They're well versed in the standards for federal, state, and foundation grants. Hiring the consultants has enabled the town to begin to tackle projects that would otherwise be put on the back burner. Having their assistance allows the department heads to be more proactive rather than reactive to grant opportunities, making the process much smoother. WEDA and its director, Matt Chatfield, assist the town and the grant consulting firm when it's appropriate to the grant. Matt's wealth of local knowledge and history of working with the town has positively impacted the grants that he has assisted with. Working with the town's grant consultant hasn't taken away from WEDA's role in grants for the town, it has enhanced it, as now Matt is involved in grants that benefit the economic development of the town, which is part of WEDA's mission. And finally, the grant liaison. In this role, I support the whole grants process. I help organize, gather, and keep the application moving and meeting the due dates of the timeline. The procedure. After the grant contracted with Gino O'Connell Associates at the end of 2023, we set up meetings with each department head to discuss their goals, future projects, and wish lists for their department. The information gathered during this process serves as a repository of key topics, which is used by the consulting team to search for grant opportunities for the town. Once an opportunity is identified, the grant consultant sends me the opportunity. Together, we organize the list of supporting documentation needed to create the timeline for submission. The package is shared with the department head. The department head decides whether an opportunity is a viable option. If the department head has a great need for the funding and the supporting documentation is available or realistically achievable to attain, then the opportunity is pursued. If the documentation isn't available or accessible in the time frame needed, then the opportunity is added to the future list. Having this future list allows the town to slowly gather the information needed in advance of the grant opening in another funding cycle. How we apply for grants. When the decision is to apply, then the grant team is formed. This team is formed at the direction of the department head who serves as the project manager. The team will consist of the department head and identified supporting staff, the grant consultant, the grant liaison, and WEDA if appropriate. The first meeting consists of firming up the timeline and identifying who will gather each piece of documentation needed. Everyone involved gets a responsibility. Various follow-up meetings will occur to discuss progress and review pieces of the application as they're completed and ready for proofing. The complexity of the grant determines the number of follow-up meetings. Before the final application is submitted, the team for the grant proofs the final document. Once identified changes are made and incorporated into the application by the grant consultant, they submit the application, and then we wait for the decision. An example of this process was with the LGR MIF grant, or Local Government Records Management Improvement Fund. It was led by the town clerk. At the time of the writing of the grant, the position was held by Dolly McGuire. She identified the building department as the supporting staff for the grant, as digitizing commercial plans was the project identified for the application. Digitizing will allow the records to be more accessible for staff and free up space in the archive area that is quickly running out of space. Steps after the decision is received. If an application is awarded, the team takes a minute to celebrate, just a minute, and then begins to firm up plans while we wait to receive the contract to review and sign. Once signed, the town can begin the processes associated with beginning a project. Grants aren't awarded to everyone who puts in an application. The awards go to the most dynamic project and application as deemed by the selection committee. When the town isn't selected, we set up a meeting with the selection committee of that grant to discuss our application and what they thought was missing or what should be added to make it a standout application in the future. One grant we recently weren't awarded for was the TAP grant. During our meeting with the selection committee, they let the team know that they liked the proposed project as described, but we're looking for some additional supporting documentation that would have enhanced our project. We have taken the feedback into consideration and are working to get the additional suggested information to add to our future application. The grants matrix. The grants matrix was originally created as an internal tracking method of grants identified as viable for application. It's shared with the department heads and their deputies or office managers so that they can track when the funding decision has been received. As an exercise in transparency, this matrix is now posted on the town website. For the viewers at home, this matrix can be found under our community tab on the town website, then select grant tracking. It's on this page where the matrix is housed. The matrix includes the name of the grant, project to be funded, amount requested, status of award notice, and amount awarded. This will be updated quarterly or as awards are received. Also, the matrix will soon grow to show not just the grants that Jean O'Connell and Associates lead, but also grants being developed by department heads and their staff, or also grants that have been developed in partnership with WIDA. One such grant that will be added is the Restore New York grant. This application is a collaboration between WIDA and the town. Return on investment. To date, with the help of our great consultant, the town has applied for $8,102,706.91 in grants. So far, we've been awarded $471,657 in grant funds. We're still waiting for the decisions on the WIDA grant for the Vosburg Pump Station, the LWRP grant for Phase 2 of Sandbar Park, and the MWRR grant for a piece of equipment for the Highway Department, totaling $3,559,616.91. To date, we have paid the grant consultant $46,800. With just the grant awards received so far, we've already seen a return on investment of 907%. So for every dollar spent, we have earned 9. In closing, the relationship is working, can only get better, and I look forward to being part of that.
Thanks, Maria. Do the town board members have any questions or comments for Maria?
I do not have a question. Maria, I want to thank you for an excellent presentation. It was fantastic. And the process of applying for grants and going through all of that and being the communication between all of the parties is an enormous lift. And I want to thank you for all that you've done to really make that happen for the town in the past year and a half or 2 years. Obviously, we see the return that we're getting for this effort, and I just want to commend you for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're 1 minute ahead of schedule. Our next item tonight is a presentation by our Town Director of Finance, Paul Adams, on the capital project matrix that he has created with some help from, I think, people such as Bridget Harvey, Director of Communications, and others. So, Paul, you're up.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, a few months ago, we posted some information on the website in regard to both historical capital projects and also the current capital projects that we have in process. Basically, I put together a capital project matrix. Some key elements are the bond resolution amount, gross amount borrowed, the project life-to-date net cost, and the net cost as a percentage of the bond resolution amount. So when you take a look at the historical projects, I have some of the older ones here. That's actually a rec center that we did back in 2010, and then we did town hall renovations and renovations of the court building in 2016. We also included some work at the rec center. The first four all came in at about 100% of the bond resolution amount. But we also did the sewer plant phase 1 project, which kicked off in 2018. That had a bond resolution amount of $10,500,000. The gross amount we ended up borrowing is about $8 million. We did receive a New York State EFC grant, about 25% of the cost, so about $2.5 million. So ultimately, we spent to date, the spending is about $7.5 million. Ended up borrowing about 71.8%. We're actually spending 71% of the original bond resolution. So I've got a note down there. Really, the net cost just represents the gross project expenditures adjusted for revenue. Generally, as I said, generally the bond resolution amount represents the expected gross spend on the project without taking into account revenue from grants and other sources. So when we do a bond resolution, it can be somewhat deceiving. The current capital projects, I have been updating the information quarterly, so this is as of the end of September. We have the various Sandbar Park projects, which are combined with various READY grants that we received. As you see, the net cost for the first floor is quite a bit less than 100%. We did receive significant grants for these 4 projects. There were actually 8 grants that total about $5 million. So even though the bond resolution was for $9.5 million, thus far we've spent less than 50% of that. Then the 5th one down, the wastewater treatment plant phase 2, that is currently in process. The bond resolution is $81,500,000. The gross amount borrowed is $35 million, and the total spend through September was $12.5 million. So we're at about 15% there. We also had the T-Bore Road project in process. That was a $7.1 million bond resolution. We spent about $2 million to date. And then there's also the highway building, which is about a $28 million bond resolution. We're currently at a spend of about $11 million at about 41%. So when you total everything together, we're at about 23.6%. So essentially, if you're looking for this information, I just put this slide in here so to make it easy for you to find. We just go to the town's website at webster.ny.gov. You go to our community, capital projects, and then you can choose a summary. You can choose to look at projects that are in process or projects that are complete. So that's about it. So if you're interested, we'll have that on the website and update it each quarter.
Thank you, Paul. Town board members, anybody have questions or comments?
No, it looks good. I think it's good educational
Yes.
because it's a newer board member. You see some of these numbers and they can be pretty scary, like, oh my goodness, they're having spending all this money. But with the support we have, Maria and Graham Writer and the work that the department heads are doing, we find ways to do things more economical, and I think that's very important to understand.
Yeah, it's a lot of numbers and a lot of data, but we just tried to boil it down to the 4 or 5 key elements to look at, just to give you an indication of how it's doing.
It looks good.
Okay.
Thank
Paul?
you.
Okay. We're on to our next presentation.
Kim? Kim's not here.
I hope not.
Okay, Jenny or Jen?
Good. Thank you, Paul.
Good? Okay. Paul, I like how this is starting to come around. I know it's a work in progress. You know, I know that one of my education things, when I heard bond resolution, if we do a resolution for 10 million, I just assume that we're borrowing 10 million.
Most people
But
do.
this is trying to show how, that doesn't mean that's what happens. That's just worth making a resolution that we are, we're showing the world that we're serious about this project when we do a bond resolution. But then as you also showed, Maria, and when the project starts and all the things that, the machinations that go into it, if we work smart, we can end up only having to go into debt for 25–30% of the cost of these projects by getting grants and things of that nature. And every dollar less we go into debt is a dollar less, for lack of better terms, that we have to tax in our town tax to the citizens. And the board is pretty conscious about trying to reduce taxes to the citizens.
Yeah, I would emphasize also that the management of these projects comes into play a great deal to keep the costs down.
Jay? Guess what? 4 minutes ahead, Paul, and our next item tonight is, you guessed it, he's still in the seat, Paul Adams, Director of Finance. This is the update on the ARPA funds, the COVID funds, the whatever you want to call it, and let it loose there, Paul.
All right, we'll try to stay on schedule. Back in April, was my last update in regard to ARPA funds. So we thought that time it would be right to give everyone another update since we're getting close to the end of the year. So I'll go through just some history. As you know, we received just over $4 million. It came in by the end of July of 2022. There are various uses, purposes that the funds can be used for, like public health emergency, economic impact, replace town's loss of revenue, general government services, premium pay for essential workers, and water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. So the town did utilize $350,000 for grants that were given to 14 nonprofit organizations back in July of 2022. We utilized another $2.5 million toward the wastewater treatment plant Phase 2 project. This covered some of the initial costs that were associated with the project. $33,900 was used for environmental testing related to 600 Ridge Road in West Webster Hamlet. $302,000 was designated as premium pay for the law enforcement's response during COVID-19. This will be dispersed over 3 years. In 2024, we dispersed $132,000, and then 2025 and 2026, we're slated to disperse $85,000 in each year. We have utilized, we have not utilized the entire amount. We earmarked $170,000 for the Sandbar Park building. This was earmarked back in April. Thus far, we've spent $69,000. So there's still about $101,000 remaining of that earmarked piece. Doesn't necessarily have to stay earmarked for Sandbar Park. We have flexibility to change that. So just in summary, of the $4,050,000 that we received, we have actually expended $3,085,000. There's $170,000 that's currently obligated. That's for the premium pay. And then for future obligations, we have about $796,000 available. So that could be obligated for other things. So we do propose use of the remaining funds. So these funds must be obligated by the end of the year. So we're quickly coming up to the end of 2024. The final rule issued by the federal government says they must be obligated or basically under contract by the end of 2024. But we do have until the end of 2026 to spend the funds. So we do have well, this goes back to April. This is what we discussed and proposed to spend the remaining balances. So we can just go through each one. So we proposed to earmark $170,000 for the animal control dog kennel. So to date, none of these funds are obligated, so we don't have a contract. We thought about using the balance toward the highway building project. This is a fully obligated project, so we can, if we wanted to, we could use the entire amount for the highway building project. As I said earlier, we earmarked $170,000 for the Sandbar Park building. To date, we spent $69,000, so it's partially obligated. Sandbar Park Phase 2 and 3, we have earmarked $170,000. That's currently not under contract. So it doesn't look like that's going to make it by the end of the year. We thought about spending $15,000 on speed monitoring equipment. It doesn't look like that's going to happen either. No purchase orders have been issued. And the last one is the Webster Hamlet. We had earmarked $170,000. We have spent to date about $115,000. Which the 33.9 I mentioned earlier is part of that. So you could say that partially, we're partially obligated to that one. So when you boil down to it, there's no obligation for 3 of the 6 original choices. So there are possible uses for the remaining $796,000. As I said, it could go toward the highway building, could go toward the Sandbar Park engineering, could go toward Webster Hamlet, or we've been talking lately about possibly putting money toward the tax assessment reevaluation consulting contract. Actually, I think Donna's going to come up and give you a little more background information on that particular option.
Yeah, so this idea came up just a couple of weeks ago. We were emailing around and we had a meeting with the think tank people.
And I'm sorry, for all the, Donna Kumar is the town assessor.
Okay.
So Paul Adams, finance director. Paul just handed the baton to Donna because this is granular and specific to a revaluation that would fall into the assessment department. So
Sorry for not introducing myself.
it's okay.
So we were just talking about, we haven't done a townwide revaluation in 20 years now. There's been a lot of really good reasons why we have not. Many of those reasons have resolved themselves, and it's time to begin seriously considering whether and when to do a townwide revaluation. So when this was presented to me, the question was, could we possibly fit that in and use these funds? So I did determine and verified at the supervisor's request that there are at least 3 companies that are familiar with Monroe County that could provide us with proposals that would commit to this project for the 2027 assessment roll, and they could make that commitment by the end of this year. In other words, we could contract these funds, if the board so desires, for a townwide revaluation project for the 2027 assessment roll as soon as December 31st of 2024. We would begin work on the project in January of 2026 because it's a 27 assessment roll. And for people who are not familiar with an assessment roll, it doesn't work like a calendar year. It starts and ends in July, publicly published, but the work actually goes from March to March, and very quickly I could go off in the weeds on a lot of technical detail. But suffice it to say, we haven't done a revaluation in 20 years. It will be an 18 to 24 month project, so these funds would be beneficial for this type of project if the board wanted to consider allocating for this cause. The project would be completed for the tentative assessment roll on May 1st of 2027. It would then go through the grievance process as every roll does. It would be finalized July of 2027. What you don't see on your screen and what I want to make clear to the viewers at home is that this would be for tax bills September of 2027, January 2028, and for village residents, June of 2028. But we have to begin thinking about this project and putting the pieces together now. So there's two perspectives of when a revaluation would start. I said launch in this screen, January launch of 2026. That's when the public will begin to be aware. But well before that, in-house, there's a launch. And we begin the work reorganizing the computer, getting on board, a lot of meetings with the vendor. How are you going to do this? What do we want to do with that? Delineate neighborhoods, we need land tables, and we need a lot of computer work to go into it, which I would be the lead for that. So the public would become aware of this more in January of 2026 timeframe. A townwide reassessment always encompasses 2 town budget periods, which is why this would work for 2027. It's not a rush. We have time to think about how we want to do it responsibly, what exactly needs to be done, what we can reuse, what parts of our assessment roll we could reuse, the computer parts behind the scenes, and what needs to be freshened up. And it gives us a lot of time to communicate to our public, because I am fully aware that there are people in our community who have bought a home and have had and enjoyed it for a number of years and have never seen a revaluation on their property. So there's going to be a lot of community involvement. We need to communicate a lot of our information and timetable to the community. And so these funds would go towards not only the project, but also a PR campaign. When I called the vendors that were familiar with Monroe County that I would trust to do a project for the town of Webster, I emphasized that public relations was not going to be their usual canned, we're used to revals, we only needed to remind you of the deadline type public relations campaign. That we were looking for a very robust campaign, and when we get to the level of quotes, whether it's with these funds or another project at another timetable, we do want them to give us their best PR people and their efforts. If we need to hire outside that, then I'll be back to the board and talking about that as well. So the budget does go from the calendar year, and the assessment roll goes from mid-year to mid-year, so it would encompass 2 budget cycles. These funds would go towards the first part of that revaluation campaign, which is actually the most expensive part, and then we would need to budget the balance of it in our 2027 budget. And I believe that this timetable also gives the board time to consider how to make up that difference. For perspective, if we're talking 800,000 for this, we may need another 200 to 400,000 beyond that, depending on the extras and what exactly we need to do. But we need to get into the granular of that before we can actually itemize that cost. Are there any questions about the project that I would like to present to you?
Thank you. Jenny, you want to start?
Well, I need to think about this one, and do some more research on it. I do appreciate the presentation, and with a lot of projects going on around that we have, so we have to prioritize, which is, going to take the precedent over.
Of course, if I can be of assistance, please let me know. Yes,
Thank you so much.
And maybe I should have done this instead of going to Q&A. And Donnie, you did a wonderful job summing up that page. You were always very detailed, and you're speaking it right. I'm going to make this really simple for the community watching this, the people that are here, anybody that watches this on tape in the future. Today's November 7th. In 54 days, our chariot becomes a pumpkin.
By December 31st, 2024, we have to be in contract on all of the ARPA money, pure and simple. So the time of discerning what do we use it for, what ideas do we use it for, we are running out of time. Now, we already have a stopgap or a default because we have a highway garage going on, and as Paul described earlier, we could just use the full $795,000 that's left and just say, well, that's in contract, so it meets the being in contract by December 31st, 2024, and it also means that it would be spent by December 31st, 2026. Very tight guidelines on this money. However, as we just said, and this kind of came about in the last week or two, so it's not ideal, the timing as far as this goes, but if there's $800,000 sitting there that we could use of this ARPA money to do a revaluation that won't start for 14 months, and we get into a contract by December 31st with a revaluation company, that's an interesting use of that $800,000. Now the board, what I'm asking them tonight is that we already have reached out to 3 usual suspects. This is not the type of thing that there are 1,000 firms that help revaluations of communities this large. So Donna reached out to those 3 firms and said, hey, would you, on your schedule, at least be eligible to entertain this for January 1st, 2026, 14 months from now? And I wasn't really that surprised. They said, yeah, if we can get that in contract by December 31st, 2024, we have a full year to kind of prepare for that. Now, as Paul said, based on our procurement policy, didn't say it in your presentation tonight, but that somewhat meets the fact that we are getting 3, if you want to call it, bids, proposals. So the question for the board is, would you like Donna, Paul, and the parties, Bridget, Harvey has helped with this also, to continue that process with these 3 firms and come back on November 21st or December 5th at that board meeting and say, hey, here is what the contract would look like, at least what these 3 firms bid, and if we decide to do this, we would have to be in contract with them by December 31st, 2024. And I'll just leave you with this. Selfishly, I've watched Irondequoit, Penfield, and other communities venture off into revaluations, kind of ready, shoot, aim, nothing against those communities, but it is a very tense situation, misunderstood, causes a lot of anxiety for the citizens. I've always thought we should get a public relations firm to spend 6 months to 12 months prior to us starting the revaluation to educate the citizens in smaller groups or mailers and take away 90% of that anxiety through education, so that when Donna and her staff starts a revaluation, theoretically, January 1st, 26, 14 months from now, 90% of the community and property owners would be like, I understand how this works. I'm not going to get these letters and all of a sudden lose sleep over it. But that's good public relations. So this timing, albeit we're coming to you with 54 days left in the year, it could really be beneficial for a community that hasn't done a revaluation in over 20 years and has an equalization rate right now that is at 52% and is trending toward 48% for next year. Translation, if your house is assessed in Webster for $100,000, it means we think the market value when you sell it is around $200,000. You want that equalization rate to be the market rate, if you can. And that's why not doing a revaluation for 20 years has brought that down, because houses have gone up in value. I'll get off my soapbox. Does that help with any questions from the board members?
I have no questions. I've been on the board long enough to know that one of the reasons, although Donna did not state it, that we have not addressed this, was always the cost.
Yes.
And where are we gonna fit it into a budget? And this is long overdue. And I think that it is a really wise expenditure of the remaining ARPA funds. I know that when we were first looking at ARPA funds, December 31st, 2024 seemed like it was all the time in the world to make that decision. And as you say, all of a sudden we're looking at it, it's 54 days. And as I said, I think this is a perfect use for those funds.
So, this doesn't need resolution, I just want, does the board, at this meeting, are they giving instruction to Donna, Paul, myself, Keith, if you're in an RFP, whoever else, to go to those three firms that you've already talked to, Donna, and now have them put pen to paper to bring us proposals that the board could then look at in 2 weeks at the next board meeting or whatever. And it really is simple. If we decide not to do this for whatever reason, I already said we have the default. We can use the ARPA money for the highway garage. We're not going to lose the ARPA money. It just, I don't know, my personal opinion, it would be a shame if we lost an opportunity to use $800,000 for something specific like the rebuild. So.
I definitely would like her to reach out to the three firms. I'd like to see the scope. I'd like to also know what the overall cost would be. So, and the sooner the better, in my opinion. I'd like to have that information prior to the board meeting. I don't want to sit in a board meeting and start reading that and make a decision, but I know that you would provide that information as soon as we get it.
I can tell you that if we didn't want to do any data verification or any data collection, which is one part that you can opt into or out of, I believe we need it. That would keep the cost down, and then we can stay under $1 million. We're going to add that. We're definitely at 1 million plus. We have complex properties. They're going to want to do that. Can't be handled by mass appraisals, so we're going to need appraisers to do those properties, those complex properties. I'm thinking of Fairlife. I'm thinking of Xerox, similar properties, right? Those are two big complex properties. So I can bring you the all things being equal quotes from one another. I wouldn't mind having a team of people that were in the room the other day discussing this, be a vetting committee and actually interview them and tell us what they're going to do for our PR, as opposed to me just sitting on the phone with them. I would like to hear a lot more from them on that particular topic that may change the price from their usual standard pricing system. But a quick answer to your question, Councilman Cahill, is $1 million plus. And
Well, then, as Patty said, who's been on the board the longest, what is one of the main reasons why it hasn't been done in 20 years, Patty?
The cost.
the cost. And if I can bounce this off of the finance director, it's always been my understanding, this is his bailiwick, but it's always been my understanding, this type of a project, it is always 100% paid for by the municipality. The assessment roll is utilized by all of the special districts, the town, the village, the county, and the school district, but we bear 100% of the cost. And sometimes the laws in New York don't make a lot of sense, and it's my understanding that the way the town is allowed to finance this, it does not qualify for a capital project. And you were just going over your capital project matrix. I thought that was actually a great lead-in, because it reminded me this project, although it costs $1 million plus, will never qualify for that. And so what you would be asking taxpayers to do is to bear an initial, over this course of the 2 budget years, you have to budget in the year the work is done for each one of these parts, and it is really heavily weighted towards that first year. So you would have to raise the taxes on the taxpayers to afford it, which is why, one of the reasons why it has not been done. And this is a wonderful opportunity to have the money handed to us.
I think we have our marching orders, Donna.
Highways.
Unless I think the board is like,
Yeah.
get back
I
to
hear
the
from 2
board
of you. I
members
guess Tom will be
with,
the tiebreaker,
whether it's
right?
alternatives, here's a $1 million offer that has base bones, here's $1.2 million that has these things, which we would look at those and go, why do we need those things? You'll need to explain those, whether that's at a workshop on the 21st or whenever you get these. We have our marching orders. And we'll get our crew together and
Moving
get
forward,
that
and I'll be back.
information.
Is that what you're saying?
You got it, Don.
All right.
And it's
Thank you
good
very
to
much
have
for
you
your time.
back.
It's
It
good to
is
be back.
good to have you back.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Now, we're 9 minutes behind, but I think we all would agree that needed that type of time, because that needed that kind of time. And I will say, as we move on to our next one, which is Josh Artuso presenting on the comprehensive plan update in Webster. Just want to let everybody know who's here tonight or watching at home. All of these presentations, sometimes we go through these things on the screen very quick. They're all on the website. They've been up there for a couple days now. 24/7 you can access these, look them over. Obviously, if you have any questions, the general public, let us know. You're up, Josh.
Thank you. So some of the board members may recall, I was before you back in May of 2022 to give an initial presentation on the need for the town to update its comprehensive plan. So tonight I'm here to provide an update on our efforts since that initial meeting. So an overview of tonight's presentation, I'm going to briefly go through a recap of some of those initial slides from May of 2022, just to refresh your memories. I'm also going to explain and go through a timeline of events of things that have occurred since then and give you a current project status update. And then I'm going to speak a little bit about our consultant selection process and recommendation, and then touch upon the project funding and next steps. So back in May of 2022, I presented the basics of what a comprehensive plan is and some of the benefits of having an up-to-date comprehensive plan. For those that may not know, a comprehensive plan is a document that serves many different purposes. It engages the community to establish a long-term vision and identify and prioritize goals and objectives. It also informs land use regulations and local decision-making and prioritizes capital improvement and infrastructure projects. So, brief history of comprehensive planning in Webster, and there were earlier growth management plans, but in the recent future, the town had been updating it every 8 or 9 years. So last time the comprehensive plan was updated and adopted by the town board was in 2008, which is about 16 years ago. So we are definitely overdue. So at that point, I had expressed what our estimates of this effort would cost. Typically, it's an 18 to 24 month effort, and about 2 years ago, we estimated that cost to be around $100,000. The next step after a plan is adopted, you then go into zoning code revisions. So you want to make sure that your land use regulations reflect the goals and all of the vision and recommendations of the plan. So we anticipated that being an additional year to a year and a half effort at an approximate cost of $50,000. At the time, we had identified several potential funding sources, one of which was a relatively new program offered through New York State, their consolidated funding application process. They have a smart growth community planning and zoning program. We also, at the time, had indicated that this would be an eligible activity for use of the ARPA funds. And we also said, you know, we can plan ahead and kind of spread out the costs just in the regular budget cycles over 2 years. So fast forward, I'm just going to briefly hit on some of the milestones that have taken place since then. I came back in the fall of 2022, and the town board actually indicated support for moving forward on the comprehensive plan update, and they passed a resolution allowing us to solicit for consultant services. Now, we had applied for the $100,000 grant through New York State in July, and the awards weren't expected to be announced until late 2022. So we did move forward pursuing that grant opportunity, but we also basically made a commitment to move forward regardless of if we were successful with the grant, given the length of time it's been since the last plan was put in place. So in early 2023, we were actually notified that we were successful in our grant application. We were awarded the maximum amount of $100,000. So then, as most of you know, when you engage with state agencies, there's often a lot of administrative paperwork and a lot of things to work through. But we ultimately did work through. We have executed our contract with New York State DOS to receive those grant funds. So we spent earlier this year in 2024, once we were finally under contract with the state, we developed a request for proposals. We are proposing to utilize outside consulting firm to help us, especially with a lot of the public engagement that's going to be needed out in the community. So we developed that. We released it over the summer, and we did receive several proposals, and we had an internal committee review those proposals, which I'll get into on some subsequent slides. So really the next step is to present that process and get town board authorization. The tentative plan is to officially kick this project off with the community in January of 2025. It's expected to be an 18-month process. So we are hopeful that we can stick to that timeline, which would give us a fully updated and adopted new comprehensive plan in mid-2026. So for the request for proposals and the consultant selection process, as I previously mentioned, we developed the pretty robust request for proposals, very detailed. We issued it to directly to approximately 30 local and regional professional planning consulting firms, both in New York State and in the Northeast United States. We also advertised it in the New York State Contract Reporter, which is where a lot of these firms keep an eye on for upcoming opportunities. So ultimately, we did receive 5 proposals from different consulting firms. 4 of them were local, 1 was in Pennsylvania. So we formed an internal review and selection committee consisting of myself, our new junior planner, Erica Corsi, Marie Dewar also served on that, as well as Keith Mortimer, our town engineer, and Matt Chatfield from WIDA. So everyone had about 2 weeks to read through all of the proposals. They were given a grading matrix to kind of evaluate on several different specific categories of each proposal. Those categories included project understanding, project approach, their technical competence, their relevant experience, and then their capacity in terms of staffing. So each of those categories were rated by the reviewers on a scale of 1 to 20. We tallied up the scores to give a score out of a possible 100. So we held a meeting and discussed each of our thoughts and ratings for the proposals. And I'm about to present to you those findings, a summary of those findings. So what's up on the screen is essentially a summary chart of everybody's ratings for each of the categories that culminates with a total score indicated, the numbers indicated in red. also see a column that indicates each proposal's total fee and the total amount of hours that they propose to dedicate towards the project. So essentially what we did was we took, we added up each score for each respective firm and then averaged those scores out to come up with a ranking. 4 of the 5 reviewers did rank Collier's Engineering and Design as their #1 choice based on the scoring. And when we factored each individual score, they actually rated highest overall on average when calculating the individual ratings. So it is our recommendation that we engage with Collier's Engineering and Design. We felt that they had a very comprehensive approach to this very important initiative. They certainly have extensive experience working with communities of our size. They're also very familiar with the Department of State. They're actually contracted by the Department of State for various activities, so they're very well versed in all of the grant requirements that we will be held to as a part of this project. All other of the 4 other proposals, they had very good elements in them, but all in all, the consensus of the group was Collier's Engineering and Design, and we're very confident that we can get a very good product with going with them. So, just to recap the project funding, again, the recommended firm's price came in at $109,950. We have been awarded the $100,000 grant from New York State, which does require a 10% local match. That brings it to approximately $10,000. So basically, the total cost to the town would be just under $10,000. Now, the 2025 approved budget includes $150,000 in funding for this project. It's shown as an expense, however, that will be offset by the $100,000 grant, which is considered revenue. So the next steps would be town board confirmation of our recommended consultant, which would lead to a resolution authorizing the supervisor to sign a contract so that we can begin engaging with the firm. We would execute the contract in November, December, and prepare for the official project kickoff in January of 2025. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or hear any comments that anyone may have.
I think it's a great project, it's been planning board for a while, it's long overdue, it'll help guide the planning board when new projects are coming to the board on, probably fitting the whole comprehensive plan and hopefully approving project or giving guidance to the board. So, it'll be nice too to have a new view for the community, that's the goal, that so much has changed in Webster. It's a great project and good time.
I would agree with that assessment, it's long overdue, and encourage moving forward.
Couldn't agree more.
No, as long as they would in the scope, the finance, it should be good.
So, thank you, Josh. At our 7:30 regular town board meeting tonight, which, by the way, we'll probably start a little after 7:30 because we have one more workshop. At our 7:30 regular board meeting, resolution 12 is about this, having the supervisor authorized to sign on with Colliers.
in the agenda, it said this may be tabled to November 21st because we just didn't know how the board would feel about the presentation that Josh just gave. So
I think
we'll
we're
cross
very
that.
fortunate to have received that $100,000 grant and to get this comprehensive plan consultants hired for, $10,000 as part of it.
I agree.
And I'm always hoping that there might be an additional grant moving forward for
Well,
the
Marie-
additional.
There might be additional grants
Implication
on the revaluation too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so we're a little behind schedule. We're gonna catch up though. Chris Bilo, you, I'll say, did we save the best for last or leave the last but not least? But Chris is our Parks and Rec Commissioner and he has a update on the Sandbar Park Restaurant Tavern Building and the October 23rd sealed bid opening that just happened 2 weeks ago. So Chris, what do you do?
All right. How's everybody doing? Okay? All right. As Supervisor just mentioned, I'm going to give an update as to how the bid process went, sort of some of the results, some of the findings that came from that process, as well as kind of get into some of the options that are going to be in front of this board moving forward. Last time we were here was in the summer, I think it was June, where we had Fantuzo Family Brands come in, where they kind of gave a brief overview to the board of their vision and their what they think from a restaurant standpoint, from a design standpoint for Sandbar Park. From that point, we moved forward with the process to continue design of that building and begin the bid process. All along through this entire sort of time frame of Sandbar Park and the restaurant and the old restaurant going away in the process of going out with the expression of interest, et cetera, and trying to select a restaurateur to build a new restaurant. The town's obviously invested quite a bit from a financial standpoint towards the creation of, or the design of a restaurant at that site. Roughly around $132,000 so far has been spent. That's from site work, and some of these figures go back as far as 2018 when the initial plan of that site was just getting started. So obviously the most recent expenses that the town has incurred really came around or came about because of the design bidding efforts of the restaurant as designed by the Fantuzo Family Brand. So obviously from a town standpoint, there's been a significant financial interest in getting this process continued. So as Supervisor mentioned, we did have the bid opening on October 23rd. As part of that process, again, there were 4 bids that were actually part of that bid package. There was general contracting, electrical, plumbing, as well as HVAC, so those 4 components. I've been to a number of bid openings in towns, whether it was here or in Penfield, and seeing the turnout that we had for this one was pretty significant. Typically, there's a small spattering of contractors that may show up. I think we had 17 or 18 contractors in the room. It also showed just by the overall impact of how many bids were submitted. In total, between those 4, we had 20 total bids. Between those 4 packages, with GC being the largest submission with 7 bids for that amount. When you add up those 4 bid packages, the total cost of that facility or that build as designed was right around $2.6 million. That figure is obviously higher than what I think anybody who's been in these meetings with the Fantuzo brand we're hoping for, but it was also, I think, a very realistic number in regards to what was bid, based on what we were learning from campus and Pass Road during this process. So the general contract obviously was the largest portion of that bid, and that was just about $2 million. So the other 3 packages roughly was around $600,000 total. So with that now being known, and again, when we were here in June, kind of going through our process and our next steps, we said we really couldn't do anything until we knew exactly where we were going to be from a from a cost standpoint. This bid process that took place on the 23rd presented that to us. So with that, based on the cost, obviously, as we've explained, over this process, there's interest on that. It's a 15-year payback period, unlike some of the other town bonds where there's a longer payback period of 30 years. This one only has 15 years. That equates to again, I use the word loosely, a monthly rent for that operator that's just not attainable. That cost to be able to do that over 15 years is just outside of not only Fantuzzo Family Brand, but pretty much any restaurateur to be able to make a business out of that site. One thing I did want to put on here is we did not want to look at rebidding the proposal as is. Sometimes that's one of the options, is maybe you can go back out and shape some things down and see if you can get a lower cost. By doing so would change the vision of what that restaurant was designed for, or designed as by the Fantuzzo Family Brand, as well as it also met the needs of what we had heard from the community in regards to the type of building, size of building, etc. So rebidding really doesn't factor in. Really kind of brings us to this, and after discussion and consideration, it really brings us to where we have 4 options. And I'll go through those real briefly that are now in front of the town board. Option 1, town in some manner contributes to the cost of the construction of the facility. That could be where the town contributes the funds to be able to cover the cost of the pylons that the building is built on, the cement work, whatever it might be designated by the town is their share. Town would also need to determine which funds would or could be allocated. Obviously, there's some legal questions that would need to even come up. Is could money be used from a fund such as a Parkland Trust Fund to be able to use towards a facility like this? Those are legal questions we have to sort of navigate if that was even considered. Option 2 is similar in regards to, again, with a 15-year payback. One option would be that the town would have to continue to pay back that bond over the 15 years. However, we could work with Fantuzzo Family Brands to be able to negotiate a longer payback period. There's plus and minuses to that, obviously. There's some concerns over, what happens longer term, you get to year 20 and, is that business still viable? The town has paid off that bond, so there's things that obviously town board would need to consider for a longer payback period for the operator. And Paul, from a finance standpoint, actually gave some information if the town was even to look at, say, a $3 million bond paid back over 35 years, including that interest, you're still looking around a $10,000 per month, I'm going to use the term loosely, rent. That still is above the threshold that we've been hearing from Fantuzzo in regards to the type of monthly cost that they would like to be at in order to operate the facility. So again, you're still looking at a very difficult hurdle. Option 3, I put on here just because I know there's been some questions on this, and I've been asked directly about this in the past, so I figured we might as well put it on here, and I can explain real briefly why. Truthfully, it's really not much of an option, but at least it gives some clarity. Could the town sell the piece of property, in other words, where the building actually sits, to a private entity to be able to build a facility at a lower cost? Obviously, from a municipality standpoint, our costs are a little bit higher when you factor in things like prevailing wage rate, et cetera. But in this option, it would be extremely difficult. Just a few factors that I threw in the slide. One, because of that property being designated as a park, we'd have to go through what's called parkland alienation. If you recall, we did have to go through that as part of the Lake Road movement. That process alone is lengthy, and it's not a guarantee that it would ever be approved. The other real factor with that is the state requires that basically you have for every acre, for every the amount of property that would be taken away from parkland, you need to add it or plus. So you need to have a net sum 0. So if you're going to take an acre away, you've got to add at least an acre plus. And again, from that location, we don't have that ability. Not to mention just the other things that would go into it now that changes the designation in regards to the operator, in regards to the taxes that would be incurred by them. Plus, we also don't even know how the state would react to the fact that we just use state grant funds to be able to fill that area in as part of the Ready Grant. So now would we be on the hook to repay those back to the state? So obviously, option 3 brings a whole nother level of questions that I don't think the town is interested in going down, nor do I even see a way that it's possible. Fourth option, obviously, is the one that I don't think anybody really wants to go down, but it's becoming more and more of a reality for us as we go through this process, which again, we've been very diligent in saying we do, is that the town doesn't move forward with the restaurant as designed. Now, I've had some discussions with people in recent weeks of, if the town doesn't have a restaurant, or are we just going to have a open space? One thing that we have, I'll say, committed to is looking at basically not turning over every stone that we possibly can. Look at every option that's available. We may not have a facility down there that is as designed currently from with Fantuza, but maybe there's something more we can do from a seasonal standpoint, whether it's an ice cream shack or a seasonal operation. One thing that we've talked about, especially after we had our event down there this past summer, is having food trucks on a regular rotating basis. So there's options available to us if it's not a structure. But if we do have some sort of space allocated, there's other types of features that we could probably bring in to be able to meet somewhat of a need that people obviously had. And one thing that I've said all the way through this whole process is whatever we do down there from a food standpoint, whether it's a full-on restaurant, a bar, or whether it's a snack shack or an ice cream shop or even food trucks, the one thing that I'll say that I've noticed over the last year, especially this past summer, is the amount of usage of that facility now as a town park is much more than it ever really was. It was always designated as a town park, but being down there now, this past summer, I was down there at least 1 to 2 nights a week, sometimes on a personal level, sometimes on a professional level. And I never was down there, especially when weather was nice, which we had all summer, where I didn't see people out using the park for what it was designed for. So sometimes, while change is difficult for people, I think the overall impact that facility's had over this past summer has really allowed people to enjoy it. When the northern lights were visible and people were down there at 9 o'clock at night, there were several hundred people that were down there, and it was difficult to find a parking spot for that type of event. So it was great to see, and I'm encouraged by that. So I think there's options, obviously, for the town board to consider. Whatever the town board does decide, we'll obviously continue with the plan. But I think as things started to become more known, both from a bidding standpoint as well as just a general overall cost standpoint, things are becoming more difficult to be able to make those match.
There you go. The 2.5 million, did that include the restaurateur's actual build out?
No. So that basically is to get you the building,
Right.
The HVAC, the plumbing, electrical. That doesn't include what they would have to put in regards to booths and tables and bar
And I'm sure they evaluated that and given the 2.5 million.
So yeah, there's additional costs for them.
Pretty easy to come to. It's too bad. I'm not in favor of spending taxpayer dollars. I'd be more in favor of, option 4, looking at some alternatives going forward.
That's what I would suggest too. Right now, the option 4 is, it looks like it's the best, effective way for us to save money and for people to enjoy the park views too. If we just have like an open air pavilion, there, so that they can sit and, watch the lake and look at the beautiful sky and stuff like that,
I would say, I do think it's important that we provide some venue of some sort for people to have food in that area.
Yeah,
We just have to get creative.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we've gone down this path, so to speak, from the beginning, because that was our intent, was to have that restaurant type of a bar facility there to replace the waste. But I think now we're starting to see, and we've had discussions all along, knowing that this was always a possibility that, those bid numbers would come back. So we've started to have some internal discussions as to what are some of the options. Some are easier than others, some are cheaper than others. So we'll have those, and I think as we kind of get into 25, we'll pick that back up and kind of see where we go.
I really like the sound of some of the options in number 4, and I think it's a very realistic thing that we explored. And certainly something that into 2025 we can experiment with on a trial basis. We don't have any, we're not putting any pylons or anything else in there. We can just bring some people in and see how it goes. I do, however, want to thank the Fantuzzo brand, the Fantuzzo family for expressing the interest and in going down this path of exploration with us. I think it was a good process. It's one that I'm sorry didn't quite work out the way we all had envisioned, but I think we can still make it very good.
I would agree with you, Betty. I had a conversation with Sam the other day, and it was a great conversation, and this whole entire time that we've worked with that group, between Sam, Katie, and his team, they've been very open to suggestions and opportunity. And it was a real pleasure to kind of get to know them from a business standpoint. And you can see why they do so well from from an organization standpoint. They have a lot of vision. They really believe in what they do. And I will say, I think for Sam especially, this was something that he was very, very interested in doing.
Sure.
It is unfortunate that, the cost, et cetera, that's the reality of it. We knew at some point we were going to be.
He did not get this far by making bad business decisions. Thank you, Chris.
I hope that the relationship that we built with Sam and Kayla over the last year plus, 2 years, maybe option 4 has something for them.
It's
So
always
we'll see. Well, that concludes our town board workshop. And Mark, can we shut down the video, we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and start the regular town board meeting. Sound good?